Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unlocking the Golden Cage. This is a series of interviews and conversations with where we unlock the stories that lie within us through the themes of my musical, The Golden Cage, and also with conversations of the people who inspired it, who created it, who love it, who made it happen. And tonight we're going to have a conversation with Paul Deizel and Peter Leibold, who were the people who created the projections that actually created the world of the Golden Cage on stage. And so we're going to hear about how you did that. We're going to see some pictures and see some video and also find out how that actually happened, how you connected with the director, how you fit in with the rest of the production. So without further ado, whatever ado is, I don't even know what that is, but so you both work with projections. Can you just say what are projections?
Absolutely. So projections are any sort of element that comes out of I'm going to be general and say a light source, and that does include lighting design in some sort of way. But the reason I'm that general is because it can come out of a digital projector, it can come out of an overhead projector. Usually in this day and age, it is more of any sort of video element in a show, and that's most of what we do, as we are no longer, for the most part, not using like magic lanterns or anything. But I like to keep it a little bit more general, but I don't want to like infringe on lighting design per se. But yeah, it's often a lot of animation, often mixing different images, whether like photographs and video together for a live performance. And it can come out of an LED wall, a TV screen, a projector, a variety of things.
So what's the history of this? Like, when did this kind of thing come into theater?
In my opinion, because it gets a little like the ancient history is like, you could say it comes a bit out of like shadow puppetry. I think the earliest aspects of it are there was a slide projector made in the 17th century called a magic lantern, and it would use paper slides and later glass slides, and it really started to appear in theater in the late 18th, early 19th century with a weird horror theater called Phantasmagoria that was all about like uh, basically making fake seances to disprove seances as a response to spiritualism. And the projections at the end through the magic lantern would be the image of a demon or a ghost or an angel. But it really kickstarted with the advent of film. And so like in the 20s, there were German expressionists like Irving Piscator, who's a director who would incorporate film projection and film scenes as well as slide photograph projection. But it was kind of like a more obscure, somewhat used thing, mostly seen for like German expressionists, like Tennessee Williams in his first and original production of Glass Menagerie. There are text projections in it, but it was really like the advent of digital projectors and being able to use computers for video and photo editing that kind of gave those tools to the masses.
So it's funny, and I saw Peter laughing as soon as I asked that question. Now, why are you laughing?
I just know that Paul delves into the history of this a lot. So I was like, great, I don't have to say anything. Paul's got all of it.
So it sounds like that this idea of projections, and I'm going to just take a picture to show people in a second what we're talking about, that it's been around for a long time, but it sounds like it also kind of went underground for a while. And it also sounds like something's happened with technology to make it much more, well, actually, let me just show some pictures because I did not know what it was. So when people were like, well, we're going to have projections, and I was like, I don't know. No, we don't. We're not going to. Let me see. Okay, let's see if I can. Graphics. Okay. There's a lot in the back end on here. Okay. So here's a picture. Let's see. This is sort of the classic from this show picture. Oh no, there's a better version here where you can see the projections a little bit better. Everything that you see, what you might think has been painted on the backdrop, that is projections, right?
Correct.
Right.
And how did you get them there? I mean, I get you that you projected them.
I mean, it's a part of it is like we created a system, we got a digital projector, hooked it up to a computer, and then we used a special software that is used a lot in theater production and dance production called Isadora. And so with that, we were able to bring in images to that software, and then also tell it like, hey, have this part of the image go to like that screen, that part of the screen right there, or just this header. And so we're able to break it up in that sort of way.
And this was a really interesting set because it was all broken up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think that there were projections on both parts of it. Like you had it broken up. How did you not have it on those black parts?
Mostly by like, we tell the program only project on these bits, and we kind of like mask it out. It's kind of like if you use like an overhead projector and you're using paper to cover and like black out parts of the overhead projection. That's what we're doing, but just in a digital version of that.
Okay. And I'll just show to people. And so even before people came into as people were coming into the theater, you were creating the ambiance of the environment. And this was a very limited situation here. I mean, this was a shell and it had to be used for a bunch of different shows. And you were creating this world, a sense of storybook or fairy tale, just with these projections. And were you also doing those lighting things on the ground as well?
We were not. Our lighting designer Michael Cole was doing that, and
okay,
yeah, there was a lot of, but with like bringing in like the color that he is doing, we are responding to that to kind of make a more cohesive image of all the different design elements together.
I see. And how much was this happening live? Were you guys there in the theater making it happen live during the show?
No.
Okay, so somebody else was running this. You designed it, and then someone else was running it.
Right. We essentially queued up what looks were happening when, and much like a lighting designer creates. There's 50 cues in the show, and at this point, you move from this cue to this cue over this period of time. We have video and imagery content that we can load in and crossfade into, or have things start moving and move to different panels and all of that. And the operator would just essentially tell it when to make those transitions.
I see. Okay. And it was moving. I mean, those clouds were moving. And then I'm going to show a video in a minute of okay. And here's a place where they stopped being so fuzzy and got clearer. So you were also kind of playing with our sense of focus as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, great. So let me pull this out. I would love to go now. I have a lot of different questions, but I would actually love to go to something that's on your site, Paul, which is of another show. Let me see if I can pull that up. It was Into the Woods, and I'm just curious how different it was. Let me pull it up and then try to get it onto the screen because okay, so now this is taxing all my technical abilities. Okay, pulling this down Into the Woods. Let's see if I can. Okay, so are we all seeing Into the Woods here?
Yes,
we are.
Oh, okay, great. So, I mean, as soon as I saw this, I was just like, I'm jealous. Wow. And this is just giving people a sense of just how much ambient reality, I don't know what other word to give, that these projections are creating. And it made me think, first of all, what were the differences in terms of, what you had to work with for the Golden Cage and what you had to work with here? I mean, I'm assuming there was probably a big shift in budget, maybe not. And what are the things that made can you just talk about the difference between these two things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of it is just equipment that we had at our disposal and different resources. Like on Into the Woods, we had, I want to say 5 projectors overall, 3 of which were doing all the way up stage, that back wall. And we also had 2 different front projectors. And so we could play a lot with depth. And there was also, there are physical trees that are tracking in and and I'm creating a lot of the times more digital trees to expand that gesture further. And I'm using front projection to also sort of like add some particles to kind of give a mystic sort of quality and just kind of blend those worlds together. And so a lot of, but like at Golden Cage, there was also a lot of collaboration with the lighting designer to make looks very cohesive, where in many cases it would be like shifting colors on my end so that they work with the overall lighting gesture and the way that the lights are playing on the physical set. Having a much more like having a set that comes in and out that at times you're just kind of seeing the projections behind the trees, and there are a few moments where the physical trees on the stage are dark, but you're seeing the light from behind. Another difference is that we were rear projecting a lot into the woods, whereas in Golden Cage we are front projecting just on a singular with a singular projector. And I think the biggest difference overall is that this set was built specifically for only one show rather than to be a showcase of a variety of shows.
I see. So you could integrate much more completely with what the other designers were doing here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so like there's a lot more depth and a lot more marriaging of ideas that we can do, in part because the other design areas are also completely fleshed out to make this singular story, in this case, Into the Woods.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So I'm hearing a whole bunch of things. So I'm hearing that there were more resources here so that you could have greater depth. So with the 5 cameras, or 5 projectors, you could have a lot more depth. You were able to integrate more because it was a dedicated set. You could integrate more with the other designers. And I'm hearing, and so in a sense, with the Golden Cage, what you ended up doing was almost making an impression rather than here it seems, so it was an impression of something rather than here it seems much realer.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other bit is this process we had weeks of, like we had a few weeks of tech, whereas we had a much significantly more truncated process on the Golden Cage. So it was just kind of being able to do preliminary like passes that fit the production and telling the story, but it wasn't necessarily the fully detailed, in-depth painting.
Okay, got it. And by the way, I'm trying now to actually like get out. Oh, here I am. I'm trying to get back. Are you seeing me now? Okay, you are seeing me. Okay, great. I also heard you use the word, one of my favorite words, gesture. Can you say how you're using that here and what do you mean?
Yeah, so like a lot of it is in response to it's creating an idea that gets at there are deeper themes, there are deeper ideas, and we want to not only like signify that like there are deeper themes, but also give a little bit of a gesture, if you will, of like this, like here is a taste of it. Here is a taste of something that goes a lot deeper. It is we are showing you like the top 2 rungs of a ladder that goes way down stories.
This is I'm blown away by how well being the creator of the show and having it all in my imagination and then having it watch it take place on stage. I was really blown away by how each of the designers told the story in a new way and on a new dimension. And then as we were editing it, I got to see those over and over again, and I just became more and more amazed, especially because this was done on a very low budget. It was done very last minute. It was done in very kind of scary conditions. I mean, we were worried every single moment that COVID was going to shut down the show. And, so we were all wearing masks. I mean, there was so much that was making it difficult to have a sense of freedom. And yet, the story was happening on all these dimensions. So what did you, when you came in, what story were you telling?
I think I mean, hopefully the story of the text itself.
I think Paul was starting with Beetlejuice.
Okay, got it. So what was your process, and what were you both doing? So how often do you both work together, and why were you both working together on this one, which was great, but like what were you each doing, and what was that process like?
So I mean, this festival, since it happened so fast and there were so many shows, not that we did every single one, but Paul and I did the majority of them, and we were brought on reasonably late in the games. So
Yeah.
We having the two of us there gave us, we each kind of took the lead on different shows, and the other person could be helping create content or doing programming or whatever needed to happen, or getting a break. And this show Paul took the lead on, so that I could be in the background supporting as much as I could, helping him with whatever he needs. Paul doesn't need much. Paul's an incredible content creator as well as designer all the time. So a lot of what you see in this piece is Paul just being Paul and the incredible person and designer that he is.
Thank you.
And before you go on, what's the difference between a content creator and a designer?
Well, the content creator, while they are doing the animations, it's kind of like, it's similar to, they're the person who builds the set, only the set in this case is the projections. So like...
okay, so you were designing and building it.
Yeah.
Okay, it was like if I composed something and sang it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So that's how you were working together. So Paul, in a sense, this was his story to tell. So
Right.
so Peter, what was your part in telling the story? What was your part in telling the story?
We had a lot of conversations about what the show read how it read when we originally read it, and what the music felt like, and how that fit into the world of what we were able to do within the confines of this festival, with the set that had to function for a lot of different pieces, within the context of what our budget and equipment was. We did a lot of that together early on, and honestly, this was a year ago, so it's
right. I know
exactly what happened. But we were both there, and if Paul needed something that I could quickly make happen for him, I would. And
yeah,
I think that
doing
was
a
my
lot of
big role.
programming,
Right,
I want to say. Were you doing a lot of programming on this? I feel like
that feels right.
And what does that mean? What is that? Whoops, sorry, I have to move this out of the way, and I have to open the window in a second. Sorry, I just need to open the window a sec. Now I'm not in the dark. I know. So, okay. Oh, now I forgot my question. What was I asking?
So programming.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm largely a lighting designer, and I do projections sometimes. So I equate a lot of things to how it kind of works in the lighting world, but that doesn't actually help people who don't do either. But in a world of, if Paul has the vision for the piece, and Paul has the artistic style of what the piece of what we're thinking it is. So the kind of three jobs that I'm thinking of in this conversation are Paul as the designer, Paul and I as the content creators, largely Paul, and I was largely programming. So Paul would have the vision, then he would turn to Paul, the content creator, and say, "This is what these are the pieces of content that I'm looking for, and this is how I think it fits into the world." And then Paul, the content creator, could create those things, and then Paul, the content creator, would hand them to me, and I would get them into the computer so that they would show up onto the right places on the stage, map onto the correct pieces of set that we're trying to get the different pieces of content. I mean, in some of those pictures, you see that we really are playing with this craggy mountain on one side, and then air and clouds on the top, and then air and clouds on the left side. So mapping those things into the right places so that we don't have craggy cliff on the left side when we don't want it, and letting those move in between.
So what I really love that I'm hearing here is that, there's like all those different parts of our brains that we're using all the time. And it sounds like you were able to shift those, because especially you had to work really quickly. If Paul had to technically figure out how to do these things, I'm assuming that would have gotten in the way of your sort of visioning of it. Is that right?
In some cases, yes. Like, it's being able to have, like, unfortunately, a lot in projection design, there is, as much as it wants, like, a giant team of people just to tackle doing the projection design of any show, often we are left to just maybe just you doing everything, and so being able to share the load and like kind of be like, I'm just in artistic world and I don't have to think about how technically what is the sequence of this
Right.
image coming up, this
Wow.
like stacking of images and videos, and being able to like have a programmer figure that out is often a luxury, unfortunately. But like just having a dedicated brain to think about the technical implementation of images and video and the system itself is incredibly useful, and does, because in tech you don't want to be thinking about, well, why is this error happening, why
What is
is the
that
computer,
aspect ratio problem?
Right. Yeah. Right.
you just want to be,
Wow.
I just want to be thinking about like, what is the storytelling, what is the design, oh, there's some error, Peter can figure out the error, because yeah, so like being able to,
It also gives you as the designer more time and bandwidth to be having a conversation with the director and say, Peter, can you get that cloud moving across? And even if it's not exactly what he's looking for, I can get the start of it in there. I can take those 5 minutes to program that thing while he's finishing conversation with the director, or watching it while I'm scrolling on things on the computer that I can't really split my focus as perfectly as I'd like to. That Paul can go, oh, no, just down a little bit, and we can get it quickly together because we have two sets of eyes.
Wow, I love it, and I also okay. So now let's go to the vision. So, what was your like? Uh, what was really fascinating to me was how the projections brought out the fairy tale, and there was that, and then they also solved this really tricky problem that I had put into the writing of the show, and it solved it in this really wonderful, magical way. And I'm going to show that in a second. But and then we can talk about that after I show it. But like, how did you come up with that feeling, that woodcut feeling? Because it just made it put everybody into the place of where the story was.
I think it was just like my reaction to the text itself, which is very like, it's very much, it reads like a myth rather than like a fable or like a fairy tale. And so, like I feel like I'd turn the page and you'd be reading about Sisyphus, and then you turn the page and it'd be Theseus and the Minotaur, or things like that, where it's and so that to me, it had a timelessness, and a timelessness to me in that sense. Like, how do I texture that? Well, often tales like that would be with like classic illustration, such as woodcuts, or such as like a more specific ink rendering, rather than necessarily like a cartoon. So like we wanted to lean into that illustrative thing as if it would appear next on the ancient scroll that you're unraveling, and that sort of texture of both like the feel of that paper and the feel of the way an ink would live on that. What I feel like, yeah, just I kind of wanted to live in that world. That was just my initial instinct.
Well, now I want to go back and hear what you said. 3 words, and I think you said not fable, not fairy tale, but myth. And I'm asking this in particular because we're making a new trailer right now, and I was just about to put the word fairy tale on it. So, and before then, we were calling it a mythical musical. So, can you talk about that?
I think, I think it's just the way I interpret the term fairy tale. Like, to me, like there's still like classic, like I think a lot in imagery. There's still a classic imagery related to that, but that's more of like a storybook, and like what sort of textures make up the border of that book? What are the illustrations in that book? And that's what I immediately respond to. And that and fables are similar to that, and that to me, like, while there might be some more older renderings of that, that's like 19th to 20th century sort of illustrations to me.
I think we could talk about this for a very long time because, well, I mean, I'm just so interested. Well, because as I watch the show, I took a long time to write it, and then as I watch it, I literally talk about it in my therapy sessions because it's got all the, like when you said there's Sisyphus, right? There's that thing, and then there's this other thing, and then there's all these sort of things that we go through as human beings. And it's not that I was smart enough to figure out like how to put them in. It's just almost like I was telling a dream. And anyway, so yeah, well, that for another one. But let's take a second here, and unless there's anything else you wanted to say about that.
I think the only thing in my head when I first read it, I went, is this a myth that I don't know? Is this a myth that already exists and like a story? Because it feels timeless, like Paul's saying. Like it feels like something that I do know that is still feels new and fresh, but is. I legitimately had no idea if this was already the Golden Cage was an idea that I just hadn't fully clocked. You know,
it could be like one of those grim fairy tales that we don't hear about. And I think the reason I make the distinction between fairy tale and myth is like fairy tale to me is the more like scrubbed clean, a little not completely Disneyified, but like Mother Goose. It's like a little sweet. Whereas I'd say like if it was more in like that shock-headed Peter or like grim fairy tale like world, that seems like a little twisted to be a little twisted for twisted's sake. Even though there are some very strong morals in those.
I don't know what to say about it at all, just because it was very intuitive to me to create it. But in fact, Peter, I do have that. I have more and more and more that feeling. And as we play it for people and people talk about it, it has more that aspect of having those mythical kind of representative of a thing that happens in life.
Right.
It's
bigger than these two characters. It's bigger than these two people. It's something that we all sort of are experiencing and are like varying levels of, and all interacting with, and all have like feelings like that in our lives. So I think that's one of the things that connects me to it's not just this is a story about these two people and it's a character study on Willy Loman. It's these kind of larger ideas and these people that are larger than life, but we're seeing them experiencing something that we all kind of go through.
Well, thank you. That's actually relevant to like this solution. What I'm thinking about, is it a myth or is it a fairy tale? And what does that mean? Sure. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Let's look at this just really practical thing that happened. And let's see if I can pull that up. So when I was first writing the show, I was actually thinking practically, because I do theater and I wanted to make it simple to do. But I was talking to somebody one day and they were like, no, just go ahead and just make up how it's going to work. And so I was like, oh, okay. And and so I was like, in the opening scene, there's this red feather, and that's the thing that connects the two characters, and it flies out and it goes around and it comes from one of them to the other. And so it made it into the script, and I didn't think much about it. And then when we were trying to put it together, it was just like, how are we going to do that? And I remember there were moments when, someone had put the feather on a piece of wire. It was just horrible. And yet this, I will just show a little video I made of part of it. Let's see if I can pull just that up. Window. All right. Streaming musicals, unlocking the Golden Cage, Into the Woods. I don't know how to do that. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I think I got it. So are you seeing you seeing Boris? Okay. I'm not going to play this here. I'm just going to show so people can see it really quickly. So he's got this red feather, and you can actually see, I'm going to pull this back. You can actually see the projections moving in the background, which is very cool. So he then talks to the feather, and he's going to let it go, and then it goes on to the projection, and it goes up. And I really wish we could have had this with more light. I kept trying to get that into the film. And then this character wakes up, and I just fast forwarded a little bit here. And then she sees the feather, and there it comes. And then she pulls it up here, and there it is. And it was just so magical and so fun. And like, did that immediately occur to you, or and how do I get back? Oh, here. Yeah. How did it immediately occur to you, or how did that come across? How did that come about?
I think it was just more of a we have the we want to do this. What is the most cost-effective way to do this in the amount of time that we have? And it's like, well, why not project it? But by doing that, it does marry the physical with the projections a bit, and in having those handshakes, because often it's not too difficult to make projections to seem to be like an eyesore and seem like they're of a completely different world, that they're not like the world of the show. And so little gestures like that matching with lighting, it is to me just like a little handshake that's like, oh no, this is a cohesive world.
Right. This isn't just a painting on the back back. So I'm just going to play this. It's like 90 seconds. I got it down just so people can see I think I am.
It started from
the golden cage. You dream about it when you are a child. The golden cage, the place where everything you've ever dreamt would happen, happens for you. The oh, perhaps we'll have better luck tomorrow.
The joiner will rust, and just in case I haven't made my point quite clear, I would like to emphasize that I spend every moment of every day in utter and unbearable solitude, suffering silently and prodigiously from sunup to sunset, while the rest of the world, etc., etc., etc. Oh.
It's so magical. and the thing that's so beautiful is that that one thing, it connected the two worlds.
I mean, one of the things for me in this too is that having that be projections, I see some world of this piece or something like it where it does become somebody dancing with it on a wire, and there is a version of that. One of the things that having it be in projections for this one was that it let it just be those two characters on stage, and they weren't deliberately having interaction. It was this thing that the feather floated away and then floated to her, instead of him and now I'm moving the feather and it's flying and it's landing in your cage before he arrives. It enabled this kind of three characters to exist. The feather could be its own character without bringing in an actor for 90 seconds.
Well, yeah. And now as you were talking about it, I was realizing, well, this whole show is about projection. I mean, it's about illusion. And by having that moment, the audience buys into the illusion, which is what the characters do too. And I think that was one of the things that just really hit me, like maybe the 10th time I saw the show, as we were listening to the different versions of it. I realized, oh my God, there's what she sees, there's what he sees, and then there's what I see. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that one little projection just started off that my experience of that with the show. So I want to thank you. I just get so excited. I just want to show everybody that Ken, did you see this? Did you see this? So let me see what other questions I have. And before I have other questions, what else would you guys like to say or, talk about in terms of your own work in general, how this fits into it or doesn't, or?
I really enjoy new work. It's always because you get to be a lot more creative. You get to respond with the writer or in composer, and you get to like you're creating something new. And so I did a show several years ago in which like there are ideas that come up, and sometimes the ideas are like, oh, for this production, like what if we did this? I know it's not in the script, but how do you feel if we did that? And yeah, you get to put like a little bit of your mark, but you also get to, it's more about like helping streamline the story. And that like, and to think about like what are, especially with projections where it's like something that is coming up and being used a lot more often, of like, I want to help translate the ideas of a writer to the stage, and like, yeah, and I want to be a collaborator, because so many times in theaters, the writer is long dead and or not in the room, and so to be like, to have you as an active participant is fantastic.
Was I participating? I don't even remember participating at all.
Just being in the room. Like,
right.
And not being like, projections, this is terrible, cut it off.
Oh, no, it was completely magical. I mean, I was just like, whoa, I never knew anything about this. So, Peter, can we take a look at one of, I saw on your site this, I mentioned it a minute ago. What
Little
was
Shop.
it? Little Shop of Horrors. Is that projections or not
There
projections?
are no projections in
Oh my God. Okay. All right. Well, let's not look at that. I mean, because I was going to say, like, how did you do this? And, was it, is there anything I should look at?
I can't think of what's on my website.
Well, let's go look at your website. Why not?
I'll pull it up right now
okay.
and think about that while you do that.
Okay. I'm going to your website here. I'm pulling it up. Here's your website. Oh, this is a Little Shop of Horrors.
On my website are my lighting design more than my projection design.
Oh, okay. So is there something different that we might want to look at?
No, because I've not put it up too many places.
Oh my God. And you know what? And this is all, and this is all going haywire. I'm looking at the wrong things. Okay. Everybody stop. Look, if anybody's, what are you seeing? Are you seeing me? Or are you?
I'm seeing Google.
Oh, no. You're seeing the notes for the show.
We're back.
All right. Okay. Maybe it's time to end. No, but Peter, is there anything, I mean, just because, if, for people who are watching this, and most of the people who watch this, you watch it afterwards, it would be fun to, or either Paul as well, if there's something else that we could show to be just like, this is how you saw it in the Golden Cage, but, here's some other examples of it. And is there anything else that you'd want to sort of point out for people watching the Golden Cage about how you integrated with the other designers, or just anything else that might be, I mean, we don't always get to talk. Well, I haven't gotten to talk to you for a year. So, yeah.
I mean, I think, just thinking about the festival nature of this piece.
Yeah.
And how, like we were saying a little bit earlier, we have limited time. It happens very fast for us. We were only brought on a few weeks before performances, so we were really doing it in the moment with everybody. But one of the things that makes that exciting is that we really have to look at the score, look at the script, and see what jumps out at us, and take our first thing and run with it. And we certainly talk with directors, we talk with the rest of the creative team, but we only have time to make one big choice, and we go all in with it. And doing this show in this festival let us play with that gesture of this mythic idea, this wood blocking idea, and really lean hard into it. And I find that sometimes in my own work, I'll get halfway through a process and go, is this the thing that's actually serving the story, or did it just seem cool in the beginning? But we don't get that time in a festival setting like this. So that's it, and we're sticking with it, and we're gonna do it in the best way possible. And that's fun. That's exciting, and it's scary, but it's cool to get to just lean hard into that, and we all know that that's the direction we're going.
Yeah, I love that, and connect together with what Paul said about, we had to find the least expensive way, like how could we get that feather over there, and and then I'm hearing you say, here were the considerations, here were the limitations that we had to work with, and they put us in. What I'm hearing is they put us into a creative edge, or they put us onto a creative edge, and then we just went with that.
Right.
And do you wish you could do that all the time? I mean, I find it really powerful.
Absolutely. I don't know about all the time, because there are times that, if we got to do this show again, I think
that's what I was going to ask you.
New and different, right? But we would make new and different discoveries. The set might be different in some ways. Our budget we might approach in a different way, and once the set shifts around, we might do. We were talking early on about 3 projectors in this show, so that we could get those 2 sidewalls and have that image continue and wrap around. And that wasn't the reality for this festival and this production, which is fine. But in another iteration, we might lean further into that. And I think, given time, we would make other new and different discoveries that we get to play in for a while. I think that both a festival model where it's a little frantic and you're just flying with what you pick is really exciting. But I think that there are also, it's really nice to be able to live in something for a while and see if that is really our initial approach is the approach that is best serving the story. Paul and I went to grad school together, and a lot of our training was big about story and augmenting what's going on. We're not trying to just make a pretty picture on the wall. We're not trying to just give you trees because you need trees. We're trying to serve the growth of the story and how it begins. We want our work to live with that and have a journey with you. And so getting to spend time with that can also be really exciting.
That's beautiful. So if you were to do it again, and if you had 5 projectors, and if you had a space that didn't have to be used for 5 different shows and day after day, what would you do? What might you create?
I think there's part of me wondering, if I got to be the overall scenographer, designer of all elements, or director or whatnot, I just get to be the idea man of another production. Part of me is like, how differently would I use projections? I would definitely want a space where the immediate image that comes to my head is if mostly we the audience and the most of the performance was within a surrounded scrim or something like that, and so there was an exterior, they were in the golden cage, mostly so that when Boris comes in and he gets trapped, we can completely take it out and close it off as if now we are all trapped in the golden cage until it opens up at the end of the show when Althea comes back, which is a big gesture, and sometimes processes are here's this big idea, how do we get there, whether or not that ends up being on the stage or not. But the idea of being bound versus being free, and I think that's a very interesting contrast to play with. I still think projections would be a lot more textural, where it's not that and maybe it would still be a projected feather, but using it to lean more into projecting a rock wall that we are all surrounded by, or a beautiful sky that is just outside of our reach, and maybe does it open up and we see and we are now in the sky at the end? Is the golden cage some a physical thing that we remove fantastically around the audience? I always love this, I love being in design meetings early on before we've truly figured out what the show is, where you can just throw giant ideas around and say what happens we did this, because it's one of the most fun bits, because you don't have to actually spend millions of dollars making that hypothetical set, because you're just making it in your mind. And does that work? Does it help tell the story, or is it too much of basking in its own idea and being hey, look at this idea, and not actually be hey, look how this idea helps tell the story?
Is it a program note?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, or I mean, even you just describing it, I'm like, wow, I'm there. I can see it. Just talk to me about it. That's all I want to.
I think, and Paul and I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like this is true, Paul. Paul and I are particularly interested in things that are not. Sometimes we get saddled. This was not that case, but we get saddled with the scenic designer goes, it would be great, a big rectangle that's just a big white rectangle at the back of the stage, and then there's everything down around that, and then we're just locked into we're watching a movie that's up on a big wall behind, and it's not. We can't integrate with things. We can't map onto things and shift how we feel about the space. We're just backgrounds. And so having this was a good one because those moving panels we could map onto and move with them and attach onto. And I think we're always more interested in more integrated projection design than movie screen, which can happen.
Yeah, and I'd say like an additional challenge overall with this festival is like while there was little bits of scenery that would change show to show, we like us and lights were like the main things that could be the most flexible, but also we are still restricted to a specific palette.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, and now we go to the barbershop, so bring on the barbershop set. So there was a bit of like, how do we differentiate amongst ourselves of like, this is what this show is, like stylistically, this is where this show lives. Like, this one's only going to live up here. This one's going to be a lot more abstract and just be shapes. So like, there were challenges with that as well.
Sorry.
Go on. No, Peter, go on.
I do think that this, having this show live in kind of a single set world where the cage is always on stage and the other side of the stage is always the outside of the cage world really let us play with this theme and always be conscious of kind of both worlds, because the characters are living between these two, one or the other, right? And we got to watch them in that world, and we weren't tracking off the cage and then opening up the stage into this giant thing. It was always present, and I thought that was really successful in this show, where sure, if you spend a lot more money, we could track on a giant cage or bring bars in or whatever, and
right.
do all these things.
Yeah.
But I don't know that helps the story.
Yeah.
I don't know that helps our audience's perspective of what's going on.
No, and as a matter of fact, that the choices that the set designer made ended up having a huge impact on how I experienced the story.
Sure.
And even the meaning of the story. So I know we're coming to the end, and I know, Paul, you offered, well, when I asked, to show just a couple of pictures from that you might have had of sort of the raw, and then I have one final question that I want to ask about projections that I hope I won't forget. So I'll ask it now, but don't answer it now.
Okay.
No, I won't ask it now, because then you'll want to answer it. I think you'll want to answer it. Okay.
Yeah, I have a few things pulled up. I have the raw. Let me go into the correct folder.
I think one thing that we're going to see here is how integrated we were into this piece and working with the other designers, and how the lighting color choices on stage affected, even if we didn't make an active change in a moment, that the bounce of that blue light on the floor would shift a little bit about how we perceive the projection. So what we're going to see in this raw image is specific to what was coming out of the projector, and not what you saw.
Like tomatoes when they're not in the spaghetti sauce.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
And do you have access to being able to share your screen? I hope.
Let's see.
Please.
Yes. Yes. Do.
Good.
I'm going to just open Adobe Premiere. Do you see that now?
We see nothing.
We see nothing, but I did hear a bleep.
I see it on your screen.
Oh, I know why. Here. I think I have to hit.
Brilliant. So this is some of the raw video footage, and you'll notice there's a black background in this, and that's because it's actually transparent. So we could put something like this, and it's just this is a 1.5-minute loop, but so that we could have a background behind it. And this is just ever so subtle movement that is going on of moving some lines just to give a little bit of undulation. And you'll also see within this that it's not like just a perfectly blue background for the sky. There's like a little bit of texture going on. Yeah, and here's
And we
did you draw these or did you find them?
These we found, and then I cut them up from like larger images and like photoshopped them together. So like this cliff is actually it's a singular cliff image, but like we only took like a small bit, and then I was kind of painting around it using a bit of a part of the other image. I'll see in a moment if I can just pull up like the raw bits. But then like here is
you certainly stylized these as well.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
did you do that? Wow.
Yeah, this is some animation of just like blurring out. This is when the push occurs.
Oh.
So we kind of like blow.
How long is that file, Paul?
This is 40 seconds.
Yeah, so it just went with that movement, and so tying with story and just helping tell that moment and lift that moment.
And that's really interesting. I don't have that pulled up, or it would be interesting to look at it, because what the orchestrator then did to that moment is very similar to what you did, but he did it in sound.
Right.
Yeah. And then this is just like, once again, just clouds moving, to which when we would put the clouds moving, we would put some of them in front of the cliff, some of them in back to give a little bit of depth.
And we'd also have them move at different speeds so that we had that parallax motion idea. And all of these things too, we have access to a lot of adjusting of these in the queue. We could take that cloud or that cliff and slowly shift it blue in the program that we use, rather than trying to build it here and make the timing work every time and put it in there. We can adjust the timing, we can adjust sharpness, brightness, all those things that you do to edit photos. We can do that live in our program.
I see. And then you taught someone how to basically do that so that they could run it in the show.
Essentially, yeah.
I see. And is that someone who, even if they didn't know about projections, but they might have known about lights?
It's always like there's often almost every process I have to train someone to do it, whether it's just like set it up or just to hit like the go button. But there's always usually a little bit of learning that goes on.
Okay. Wow. And I mean, these look so, like little lost lambs. And yet, when you put them together, they looked like an environment.
Yeah.
Paul, are either of those top two in the center? I really can't see from here. Are those? Oh, right. I mean, that's interesting. So that this is using some of those other clouds that we were seeing, and playing with their depth and focus, and which one is moving faster and larger, and what the scale is shifting.
Yeah, and this is, I think, at the very beginning of the show when Boris is flying around.
Wow, I wish I had the raw footage of the show or like flat, so I could like literally just watch all the projections.
Well, when we do this next time.
Okay.
Well, next time we're going to be in a giant cage.
Yes.
Right. And the projections will wrap around fully.
Is that a possibility? Does that? Or have you?
Yeah, I've done some 360 projection before.
Paul was just working on a show a couple months ago that had almost 360, if not quite.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that I didn't know anything about projections before we began this. Are there any others that you want to show?
It's mostly this. Let me pull up. Here is like a stock image that like, this is where like we pulled rocks from over here. So it's royalty free. And so like we would take this, repeat it. I colorized it. An initial idea that I did do that we ended up not going, because this sort of ink rendering ended up being a lot more exciting, was I had initially like done a bunch of like these are my own ink blots with just a little bit of things.
Oh, right. I remember you working on those.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
And so this is Paul physically creating these ink blots on paper.
Right. Yeah.
And digitizing them.
Which is interesting, because when I made my original poster, I actually did something very similar to that.
Yeah. And so like I think here's like some raw clouds, and then I like drew some lines on them, and then and this just ended up being a direction that didn't work out, but it and we shifted pretty quickly because the nature of the timeline meant that we had to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because partly this is really time consuming.
Yes.
And within the structure of the time that we had available to get this show up and running, Paul did some of this early on before we got in the room, and then we kind of realized that this wasn't the route. And so we went, okay, great. Not making any more ink things. I'm not spending more time on that. We're going to dive in that thing I was talking about earlier of dive into this and go full force.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. It's just powerful to hear about it and to just think about in general how we can start something, think that we have to do it a certain way, and then when push comes to shove, we realize no, we can create this world really quickly like this if that's what we have to do.
Right.
And how effective that can be. All right. So my final question is, because you're working with projections, has that impacted your sort of philosophical or spiritual sense of the world? Like, that story about life is just projected on what is that? It's the Socrates story. I don't know whose story it is. That you're inside a cave and all these things are just projected. Anyway, does it impact your experience of the world? Do you ever have this feeling like the world is just a projection?
I don't think I ever had the experience that the world is just a projection.
Well,
but
it
now
does
I
will.
But it does impact mostly because of content creation, the way I'll look at certain things. We'll use a lot of grunge textures to overlay and give a little bit of character, a little bit of depth to different images that we use. And so sometimes I'll be walking around and I'll see a really gross, grungy sidewalk, and I'll be like, ooh, that would be beautiful to use, this horribly ugly thing, and it's ooh, that would be fascinating. And so I notice texture a lot more. I notice little things like that. I'm starting to notice what I respond to is very, part of it is particular because I'm me and I'm a weird particular person. But the other bit is oh no, I'm I utilize texture a lot in certain ways of what I utilize imagery and composition in specific ways that isn't always applicable necessarily to a film world, but just because projections, the canvas is 4-dimensional because it's the 3 dimensions of the set and the 4th dimension of time and the way that things progress. And so I'm noticing little things like that of not necessarily I see the world as a projection, but now I'm going to think about that.
Well, what it's making me think of is I used to tour with a percussionist, and he was always finding things that sounded a certain way, and it could be a hubcap, it could be anything. And so by the end of the tour, our car was just filled with stuff that all sounded a certain way, and that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
I mean, we get to do that too, but it just lives digitally on our computers.
Or
so we don't have to. It's not filling our car; it's filling our cell phones.
although I do have a nostalgia for analog technology, so I have a 16 millimeter projector in my room, and I have a Betamax tape that isn't opened, and I don't have a Betamax camcorder, but I have an unopened, unused Betamax tape.
Is that because it has a different texture? That is it that you like the machinery, or that it creates something?
A little bit of both. The way something shot on film looks very different than it coming from a camcorder, which looks very different than the way it looks on your cell phone, which looks very different than a high definition digital camera. All those little things, and
Wow.
Those are the things I have to pay attention to, because it's very funny because often I'll hear a word that has significantly more meanings to me. I've been asked a number of times, do I do animation? And to me, I think of all the different types of animation, and I'm well, I do a lot of motion graphics. I do some more environmental things. But I'm not doing a full like 2D cell rendered classic cartoon. I'm not doing Pixar level 3D animation. But often I'm being like asked like, oh, can you do some animation to like have this like make the water move in this still image? And I'm like, yes, I can do that. That's within my repertoire. But like I'm noticing like certain things have a lot more depth.
What do you mean? They have a lot more depth?
Having a lot more meanings. Like
so what I'm hearing is that you're thinking of animation as the concept of animation, and other people are often thinking of it as a specific thing.
Yes, and it's not just animation. That's just the best example I could immediately think of. But yeah, little things like that.
Wow. Well, I think we could talk for a long time. Is there any last thing you'd like to share, Peter?
I was just thinking about a little bit of in response to, is the world of projection and kind of what Paul was saying of, I think this industry makes me kind of look at the world and see the beauty of the imperfections. And that's sort of some of the things that I feel like you were getting at a little bit, Paul, too, of like VHS tapes have a specific kind of imperfection, and that's interesting. It's not this like perfectly crystal clear HD, whatever, that our phones can do even now. There's in life, so little is like perfect and pristine, but how we're reacting to that in life and how we can kind of put that on stage and make that feel more real because of the imperfections, or feel less real, and be able to play with the depth of that. I think I see that in the world a little bit more than I used to.
Wow. I mean, I'm hearing you say all these beautiful words like depth and gesture and, and the animation of things. I mean, all things that are alive have some kind of animation. And then this idea of imperfection and how that brings depth. And it's making me think, since I look for those things in my own work, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's not even the specific thing that we're doing, but that when we do something for long enough, it opens up all of this to us.
Sure.
It opens up the richness. It opens up the beauty of what imperfection gives us.
Right. Yeah. And things that can be looked at as negatives, that really how they function as positive within the right context.
Right. It's almost like they bring life into it in a way that, wow. Well, thank you for this incredible conversation. I can't wait to share it. And I'm so glad we got it recorded. And thank you. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
And it just makes me want to do this all over again with you and see what, in a whole new way. Okay, good. Good. I'm working on that. All right. Well, thank you again. And thank you for everyone who happened to be here live and who will see this afterwards. And I would love to hear, what you've experienced from it. And Paul and Peter, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.